So, welcome.
Thanks, Clay.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Dan Lemberg. Dan Lemberg and I go back a couple of years. We worked together at General Dynamics, formerly known as VIPS. Dan was the what we called the business owner for one portfolio of products that we had, called the medical and quality management products in the healthcare payer space. Easy for me to say. Dan can say a few words about what happened before that, but he was with us for a long time. Then suddenly he decided that what he really needed to do was go off and start his own company. And I'll do a small spoiler, and recently sold it. So this is all good news. Dan and I, during the time that he worked with us at General Dynamics, had started working on some lean principles. And he was actually one of the people within the organization that took the lean canvas and adapted it in different ways. And one of the ways that he finally adapted it, once he left us, was to turn it into a pitch for investors. And that's what Dan is going to show us how he did that, and at the end, hopefully, give us some practical tools that we can take home. So, please welcome Dan Lemberg.
Well, thank you, Casey. Hello, everyone. See, this guy inspired me too much. That was the problem.
I believe, right?
So as Casey mentioned, I used to work at General Dynamics. I was what we called the business owner for our quality management product line. Primarily, those are quality compliance tools that are utilized to measure the quality of care and delivered by provider networks, and it's sold to insurance companies. I had about 50 customers. The reason I bring that up is because that was actually incredibly important to me as I went in front of the investors, because one of the things that you have to sell when you go in front of the investors is yourself. And we're going to get into that. So jumping across to the first slide, I realized when I started putting together this idea that I had for a new type of quality management system, I did the lean canvas, right? I went out to my customer base. I had 50 customers to draw from, so I started interviewing them. I said, hey, this is my idea. Would that work for you? Got a lot of great feedback, came up with the lean canvas, and I said, great, now what? So I took it to Casey, and Casey said, yeah, this isn't really a good fit for what General Dynamics does. So I said, okay, but I believe strongly in it. I'm gonna chase it anyway. And he said, you know, that it's a shame to lose you, but I wish you the best of luck. So I started going out and looking at investors, and I realized pretty quick that there was a big difference between putting a lean canvas together and getting somebody to pay for it, right? And the biggest issue was, if we jump to the next slide here, that to investors, you're basically a subprime loan, right? So here's the guy with the piggy bank, and he's got a couple of options ahead of him. He could take his money and he could put it in a low-risk account and get a nice steady return on it. He could do a medium risk and get 10%, or he could invest in you. And the question is, why would he ever do that? He doesn't know what your risk is. He doesn't know what your value is. He doesn't know what he's getting out of it, right? So how do they win? Let's jump to the next one. So how an investor wins is essentially the same way that they win in the subprime market. They bundle all the risks together. You never bet on one guy. If you bet on one company, then there's a good chance you're going to lose. Most startups fail. If you bet on 10 companies and each of them has a 10% chance of a 20 times ROI, now you're going to double your money. Much safer bet. So that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to bundle together companies that they understand the risk and the value for. So can we move on to the next? So how you win is you get included in that bundle, right? And to be included in the bundle, what you have to do is help the investors understand and quantify your risk and your yield. And the lean canvas turns out to be a great way to do that. So here's risk times yield. Math, if you think of it from a math perspective, if you got a whole bunch of these and the total value is greater than 1 for each, investors are going to win. If it's less than 1, they're going to lose. So that's what they need to understand. So let's move on to the next guy. So lean canvas turned out to be a great mechanism because unconsciously investors are thinking in the same way, turns out, as I was talking to these guys. They're thinking like a lean canvas. You know, the same phases that you would go through to fill in the lean canvas, that's the phases that they want you to prove your value in. So phase 1, they want you to prove that you have a business. Is there really a market here? Phase 2, they want you to prove that you really have a product. And then phase 3, they want to prove that you can execute. These are all critical steps. And when I looked at it from my experience with running lean, I realized that the phases that you filled in the lean canvas were about the same. Proving you have a business is similar to the problem-solution fit. Proving that you have a product is similar to the solution-market fit. And proving you can execute is essentially the scale phase, right? So let's go to the next one. So here's a stereotypical lean canvas, again from Running Lean. You see all the key pieces here. What I've done is I've taken each of those steps that we talked about, prove you have a business, prove you have a product, prove you can execute, and I put little stars next to each one so that you can see how they map in. And we'll show some concrete examples here too. But the first step, proving that you have a business, you have to do that before they will listen to you on the product side. If they don't believe that there's actually a market here, that you have that there's an actual customer base with actual problems who feel actual pain that they are willing to pay for, you're never going to get to the next step. You have to convince them on that. Once you convince them on that, then you can sell them a product to alleviate that pain. And unfortunately, I think this is where a lot of people run into difficulties. They focus on the product piece and they forget the whole, proving that there's a business piece, right? So the key things to proving you're a business, you have to be able to identify who am I going to sell to, what's the segment, what's the problems that the customers are facing, and what are they going to pay to solve those problems. That's critical. After that, the product itself, what's our solution, what makes us unique, and how am I going to get it to the customer? How am I going to make them aware of it? How am I going to get them to buy? And then finally, proving you can execute, what's my cost structure, what are my key metrics? Okay? So let's go on to the next one. So what I did is I put a slide deck together with each of those components, and this is how I mapped it. We're going to show a concrete example right after this. So proving you have a business, that was my first set of slides. So you can see that on the right, that's essentially the slide deck agenda. Those are the topics that we're going through. And you can see how the lean canvas maps to it. The stuff in orange are things that are not in the lean canvas, but you have to pitch anyway. So number one, you've got to pitch the value of you, right? If you go into an investor, the first thing he has to understand is, why should I listen to you? If I got the same pitch from somebody else, why wouldn't I choose them instead of you? And how can I know whether you really know what you're talking about? I got to make sure that you're credible, right? So the more credible you come across to that investor, the more he's going to listen to you, and the less proof that you have to offer as you go through it. So remember that. They're buying into you as much as the idea, perhaps more so. From a customer segment, they want to understand, what's your target market? How big is it? Who participates in it? Problem. What problem are you trying to solve? How do you know it's a problem? And how do you know how big it is? And then revenue, and this is critical, how much are they going to pay, is that segment going to pay for your solution? And if they don't pay now, a lot of people say, well, it's new, they're going to pay for it in the future. You got a lot bigger barrier, right? If there's no competitors in your space and nobody's willing to pay for anything right now, it's going to be very difficult to convince an investor that you really have a business, okay? So I turned that into 5 slides. Intro and agenda, that's where I introduced myself, proved the value of me. Market overview, go through the market space. Business drivers, what does the market care about? Market challenges, how are they being impacted by the changes going on right now? And impact by segment, that's where I would go through and quantify the dollar impact to them of the challenges that they're facing, and would present a value prop for what we're trying to solve. Okay?
Any questions at this point? Comments? Ready to agree? All right.
I know I'm going too fast. Normally I talk for 4 days straight, and I've got 20 minutes.
I have a quick question for you. At what point do you put this together? Obviously, you're saying take the stuff out of the lean canvas and put it in this format in your slides, and some of the best will give you $1 million. But obviously, you're going to have to prove your customer segments, prove your problem, prove your revenue. I mean, I'm going to answer my own question. This assumes you've actually iterated on the lean canvas several times and gotten to a final state.
Absolutely.
Where you've proven all these things, right?
Absolutely.
And now all you're doing is taking the canvas, bringing it apart, putting it in a presentation, and saying, "Now give me some money."
You're pivoting the lean canvas. So you've gone through and you've already proved the lean canvas to a certain level of depth. You're always improving upon it, right? But you've taken it to a certain level of depth. You're ready to start going out there. You are going to find that as you go through this process with investors, you're going to get shot down a few times. And one of the things that you want to do at the end of each pitch is ask them, well, how could I have done better? use that to improve your lean canvas and flow it through to your presentation. Yes, sir?
Yeah, Dan, are you following, for your lean canvas, are you also following a traditional business planning model of, that you get from Small Business Administration? Is that...
Yeah, actually, yes. And the way that it was interesting. So first I filled in the lean canvas, then I created the pitch, then when I got acquired, the first thing they asked for was a business plan. And I had a template for a business plan, and what did I do? I pulled the materials from the lean canvas and I filled it in.
Right, so that's an excellent question, actually. The lean canvas is a business plan if done properly.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. Prove that you have a product. Here are the key parts of the solution, the unique value prop, the unfair advantages, and the channels. So on the solution, question is, what are you selling? Yeah, at the end of the day, we understand the problem now. We understand the pain. What are you selling to address that pain? And who are you competing against? And make sure that you at least know who you're... make sure you have a competitor. If you're going out there and nobody's competing with you, then that's a giant red flag. All right? Competitors validate the market. What's your unique value proposition? How are you going to differentiate yourself? And unfair advantages. This is a critical piece because I found, they're going to be concerned that you're going to go out there and you're not going to be small and you're not going to be well funded, and somebody else will say, you know what, that's a good idea. Let's just clone what they did and run with it. And then you're in trouble. So what prevents them from doing that? That's a key question you need to be answered too. And then the channels. How are you going to reach the customer? What's the sales and marketing strategy? You can be lighter weight on this. So you have to be rock solid on the fact that a business exists. You need to be credible on the product, but it's not as important, especially the channel piece. You can be a little bit lighter here. So key slides on that. Solution overview. You can have several slides on that. Pricing strategy, competitive assessment, marketing and sales strategy, you can kind of lump together. All right, and so the last piece, and then I'll show you the actual pitch that we put together, is the prove you can execute. Now these are two things that are not in the lean canvas here. Execution plan, that's critical though. So great, we sell this to, we give you the money, you go out there, you've got a great idea, you've got a great business, how are you actually going to execute? If you can't execute, that's a huge risk factor. Now, be aware that if they don't believe you on your ability to execute, what they may do is say, you know what, you've got a great idea, but as part of our investment in you, we're going to bring in our own leadership team. Be prepared for that and be flexible around that. That's a great way for them to mitigate risk, right? Key metrics, this is key. How are you going to be measured? How do they know if you're succeeding on your execution plan or not? Think that through. Cost structure, this is critical. How much money are you going to need, and what are your financial projections? Now, nobody believes your financial projections, I'll tell you that. So I thought, at first I had all these spreadsheets, and I was like, oh, it's going to cost this much, and this is how many people I'll need. They believe you on the cost. Nobody believes you on your revenue projections, right? So that doesn't survive very long, but they want to make sure that you have thought it through. And then this one is the most critical, and unfortunately the lean canvas doesn't really have anything on this. So you've gone through this, and they have a pretty good idea of what your value prop is. They understand the business, right? They understand your product. Because they believe in the business, they know that they can adjust the product after the fact if it doesn't quite work out and still be okay, or even pivot. But they've put a block of money into you, right? And that's permanent. They need to know what the end game is. How am I going to get that money back? So let's say that they gave you X amount and they acquired a 25% stake in you. They need to know what's the end game and how much are you going to be worth at that end game according to your projections. And then what are we going to get out of that? What's our ROI? So common end games would be you go public or you get sold, one of those two. Figure out which of those two that you're going for, or if there's a third approach. Make sure you know what that end game is. Pitch that as part of the funding, and say these are the kinds of things that we're talking about, but be flexible because they're going to have their own ideas, right?
Just one more thing on what end game is. Another common third one is another round of investment, right? So
yes.
So it's kind of important, and this is something that if you've gone through venture funding, you'll learn, especially if you have angel investors, to protect your angel